We are back, and actually this time it is we. We are here with soon to be my good friend, Ryan, and I brought him all the way from the big city of Billings as our first guest here on the Progressive Resistance Podcast. This will be episode 6, I believe. And we're going to, I guess, kind of pick up where I left off, I believe, on episode 4, which was called Why Strength Training. And we're going to talk about kind of all things fitness. You and I talked ahead of time, kind of organized a plan of some questions and things that we might discuss and bring to the people, bring to the masses. So we're going to do that today. So when I was visiting with Ryan, we were texting back and forth. He was sharing, I saw it it was on Instagram. He reshared the post and it said, 40 minutes into the podcast. All right, well, let's dive right in. So we will try not to take 40 minutes before we dive right in. However, I do want to kind of set the stage a little bit as to who you are and why we might listen to you and all that good stuff. So let's start there, man. Tell us who you are, what you do. Let's get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, so my name is Ryan Jore. I've been a trainer at Grand Health and Fitness for like 8 years now. Played a bunch of sports in high school, started lifting weights, went to college to be a physical therapy assistant because I thought that'd be kind of like a trainer, which it was really not, but at least gave me a background in like biomechanics and some other basic anatomy stuff that eventually led to me becoming a trainer.
And you said you've been trained for how long now?
Just over 8 years.
Okay, cool. So you and I have that in common with the physical therapy background, right? I was an active physical therapist assistant for 10 years. Just recently just phased out of that into the gym full time and have been doing training through all of it. For those of you guys that don't know, has been following the podcast, you know a little bit about me, but for me on the training side, I've been doing personal training for about 15 years. And then with the physical therapy, like I said, about a decade on top of that. So I think the two have definitely been, one feeds the other a little bit and have been super helpful and kind of a revolving door in that way. I've had clients that come to me because they know I'm a physical therapy practitioner. And then I've had patients come to me because they know I spend a lot of time with the barbell in my hands, right, and work in that world as well. So both very complementary. And what you said about some of the biomechanics and the human anatomy, that's probably one of the things that you've probably found to be most useful from that, I would say.
Totally. Like I definitely feel like for trainers, there's no need to actually like go to college, get a full-on degree, but having that anatomy background for sure, like even if you just took that course, is hugely helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we'll probably get into that later on one of the topics we're going to discuss as well. So, well, cool. So thanks for coming. I should say that. I appreciate you being here, and I'm excited about this and the opportunity to spread some knowledge and get some people thinking about maybe some things when it comes to their general fitness and, right, hopefully get a little more efficiency on what they're doing. So next topic and question I want to kind of present to you is, and I had asked Ryan ahead of time too. I was like, give me some topics that are on your mind, some things that, you got some fire for right now. So I've definitely included some of those. And one of them was, let's talk overrated and underrated exercises. So
first one, I work at a commercial gym, so I'm probably gonna be a little biased here because I see this a lot. Depending on what gym you're at, you might not see as much, but for me, it's burpees. I've never actually programmed a burpee for a single client other than one time when I had someone doing a Spartan race. They just had to know how to do a burpee for the Spartan, but I just feel like there's always a better option. They get your heart rate going, and I guess if you had literally no equipment, but generally I don't tend to have a lack of equipment, so it's like, if I even have a dumbbell, I can think of 10 exercises I'd rather do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, again, right. It always comes down to, for me, I'm like, why are we doing this exercise? Right. That always, like, I always say that, exercise for the sake of exercise is like what makes me most homicidal. So I want some intention and some purpose behind that. So burpees would be like your top, like, overrated.
I'd probably say it just because you just see them so much.
Sure.
But
sure.
Again, if you're in prison and you got nothing else to do, like, fine. But I mean, if I've even got a kettlebell and we can do swings, I'd rather do that.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Okay. And what would you put as one of your top underrated exercises?
Underrated? Am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You can swear. Okay. If we need to, we can bleep it out. But go for it.
I just really fucking love 45-degree back extensions. Like,
oh, okay. Absolutely.
I just think they're so underrated. Again, like nobody gets enough glute and hamstring work. We don't overtax your back. For a lot of people who have back issues, they seem to be nice. Like,
I'm just going to interrupt you real quick just to say amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
I can't think of a program that I can't fit them in.
Okay.
Like, I know everyone had the thing for the reverse hyper, and I still love a good reverse hyper.
Sure.
But I don't know, 45-degree back extensions, they just seem to work so well for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, my mind is racing with all of these things.
Yeah.
So, as you talk about the 45 degree, the 45 degree hyperextension, why 45 degree over 90?
So I find it's a little more, like a little easier entry level. And then also for a lot of people if we're doing, say, like hip thrusts, we're hitting the glutes at a shortened position. If we're doing squats and deadlifts, we're hitting that lengthened position. 45 degrees, we hit it in that midpoint. So to me, it's kind of just connecting all the dots on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And because I agree with you on that. I think if you're going to choose a hyperextension movement, there's a few things. Again, I'm going to come at it from why are we doing the hyperextension today? Because that's definitely going to change how I facilitate that exercise for that client. And it's also going to change the angles for me. So absolutely, I'm with you. I think the 45 degree hyperextension is superior for glute and hamstring development than the, per se 90. That still can be useful, right? But the thing that I find happens the most with this, and I'm sure you've seen this, is the overextension at the top. Yeah. So for me, again, why am I doing the exercise? I spend a lot of time with the discussion of what is my primary mover or my primary joint, therefore my primary mover. Getting people to get their brains wrapped around that as they step into a movement is huge, because then suddenly now we're putting intention behind this. We're thinking about why we're doing it, where we're moving from. And I always say thinking about it is half the battle for a lot of my clients, right? And so getting them to not overextend at the top of that hyperextension, because I'm like, extra and maximum lordosis is not the objective, right? So like getting them to understand that, like, hey, when you come to the top, a lot of times I'll be like, hey, pretend like this is like a glute bridge and you're driving your hips into the pad and squeeze the butt, right? And I watched an interesting video, not to rabbit hole here too much, but I watched this interesting video and it was talking about, this lady was discussing that squeezing your glutes at the top of like a squat or a deadlift shouldn't be done, and it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect anything. And I watched the video and I immediately disagreed with her. And my reasoning for that is because of the pelvic rotation, right? So we know that, or at least I know, and I find personally, in my opinion, glute activation is highest with a little bit of a posterior tilt. Because we're getting it even more in a shortened position because of the nature of where the hamstrings tie in and everything else. Now, when we're talking about a 45 hyperextension, same thing. So I want to get that person thinking about, hey, I'm trying to achieve hip extension, not lumbar extension, right? Now, if we do that, is the lumbar spine and the lumbar, erector still working? Absolutely. But are they the primary mover? Absolutely not. And the beautiful thing, right, we take that 45 degree extension with that intention, and we're starting to smoke the glutes and hammies with some of the other changes and cues that I'll have them adopt. Now I can take that into a bigger, more global movement, right? Yeah. Like the deadlift and things of that nature. So yeah, man, I'm glad you said the 45. That's a moneymaker. And I've seen you in some of your videos with your clients. You've had them do it in a standing position, off the pin in a power cage, right? Yep.
So now we do have like a little fold up 45 degree back extension, but initially we didn't have one, and again, I'll use any excuse to use them, and we just kind of had to get creative and figure out a way, like, okay, how can we still do these?
Absolutely.
So yeah, even just using like a single leg roller, you just put it up, that hip height works really easy. I was gonna ask you then, what's your thoughts on, do you ever do like rounded back 45 degree back extensions?
I do.
Okay. I'm a big fan.
I do. Yeah. And because there's a time and a place for being in physical therapy for as long as I was, we had tons of students that would come through, right? And I had an opportunity to work with a lot of them. And sometimes they would spend some time with me, even as the lowly PTA, because it was good for them to see, like, hey, what's the life of a PTA, right? And I've always said that a physical therapy assistant, my job is coming in at halftime and playing the whole game, because I'm often, my days were scheduled to patients that I'd never seen before, but I'm seeing them on their like 13th visit. And so I got to be up to speed, and I got to be able to like come in, have it be a smooth transition and keep the flow, right? And so these students would hang out with me, and I'd be doing a movement or something with someone. And let's say it was a deadlift. And I would often get asked from the student, which was like, well, how come you didn't fix this? How come you didn't fix that? Right? And all of these things. And I'm like, finding the balance of not over cueing your people is, we're talking about underrated and overrated stuff. Underrated, that's an underrated skill. Not over cueing. So when we talk about the rounding, right? People are like, oh, well, it's got neutral spine. I'm like, yeah, I agree. However, it's super relative. And like, is that going to compromise them in a negative way? And where's the load, et cetera? But the nice thing with the rounded, especially thoracic spine, it encourages that little bit of a posterior tilt downstream. So getting how you organize upstream or downstream can then directly affect the other, I find. So
see, I found like if I have someone where we're doing that specifically because they have back pain, it's like I'll try out both versions. Like whichever one they feel their glutes the best on, and whichever one feels better on their back, we just do it. And then same thing if we're doing it for aesthetic reasons, it's like, and we just really, like you said, want to get that good glute activation, get that good glute sensation. It's like, let's round it, and you're just cramping after like 10 reps usually. Yeah,
man, absolutely. And what you said there is like, what does it feel like to the person? What does it feel like to the client? That is more valuable than anything. I can typically tell, I've been doing this long enough that I can tell what's working the most by how the movement pattern looks and views. But I ask my clients all the time, I'm like, how does that feel? And then the question I'll ask them is, are you feeling that where you want to? Not where I want to.
No.
I always give it back to them. I'm like, are you feeling this where you want?
Because
it's got to be that mindset of them going, why am I doing this exercise? Where do I want to feel it the most? Are you going to feel it other places? Absolutely. Because all sorts of things are going to be working for essentially any task we're doing. But let's prioritize what's my main objective and where am I going to feel it. So I like the roll on the spine sometimes if needed, not always. And I also like if you have a spot to do the 45 where your feet are locked in, right? Or you at least have a heel plate to be against. I like external rotation of the hips to cue glute activation even sooner.
And again, that's another one where it just depends on the person. Like we'll play with both because again, I'm fine with either version. It's like, again, what do you feel the best with? The same thing like kind of like rear delt exercise. I feel like it could be like the same way where they can look right and they're not feeling it in their rear delts at all. And that's glute stuff's a lot of times like that. It's like, okay, it looks right. Does it feel right?
Reverse flies. I'm like, I should be feeling this in my triceps, right? Well,
Technically,
yes.
You should feel them. What are you fatiguing in first?
Exactly. The best example I ever have of like feeling it in an odd spot is I had this client I worked with one time, and we were doing lat pull downs, and he was new to the game, new to strength training, and we were on like maybe second set. And so again, I asked him, hey, those look pretty good. How are they feeling to you? Where are you feeling like it's working the most? And he thought about it for a real long time, longer than he probably should have needed to. But when he finally answered, he slowly reached down and grabbed his calf.
Definitely.
I was like, cool, man. Well, let's do another set when you're ready. So why was he feeling his calf? Because you've got the leg plate that you're locked under in the lat pull down. And that's what his brain was giving him. Hey, I feel my calf getting tired because I'm pressing my legs up into this pad, right? So that's just what he grabbed initially. Were his lats working? Yes, of course. But getting that mind-muscle connection, I think, is undervalued, and getting people thinking about it is important. So if I was going to answer the same question on overrated and underrated, I was thinking about this a little bit this morning. I kind of had a hard time figuring out what I think my overrated one is. But what I kept circling back to is when I'm training people, I'm adding specificity to what I'm training them for. I worked with a sprinter for a while, and I think when I was working with her at the time, she was in high school, but she was rated 5th in the nation on a collegiate level. She was a monster. I never had her do a bicep curl. Right? Like the things that I was doing, she was seeing me to help improve getting out of the blocks and things that were going to show up in mechanically and how she runs. So that's where we put our focus. So I just think you're going to just do this exercise just because I think that's overrated sometimes.
I would agree.
So like maybe that's where the burpee falls in or things like that. But so that was kind of my thought with the overrated. And I think underrated, if I just had to pick one, and I don't know that it's maybe underrated, but I just think it's misunderstood, the deadlift. The deadlift is probably up there for me. And in fact, I think like sometimes I've thought about that. Have you ever considered that? If you lived in a space where you could just like specialize in like one thing, or like, like Dr. Deadlift or whatever, man, deadlifts, I have a huge passion for those, functionally what they do for people, how much I use them in the clinic with my low back patients. And again, with you saying what you said earlier, and I agree completely, almost everybody is underdeveloped in the glute and hamstring or the posterior chain generally. And my theories for that are several, but we spend so much time in flexion. Right now, you and I are in flexion. Your drive up, to Cody from Billings, you were in flexion. So we spend so much time in flexion. Our existence deserves to balance the scales with extension bias movement. And deadlift is the epitome of that.
Totally. And it's just the amount of people where it's like, oh, I've just got chronic back pain. It's like, well, you ever consider maybe your back's just really weak? It's
precisely.
There's so many people where it's like, okay, you're squatting, whatever, let's just say a certain amount of weight, but you can't deadlift 100 pounds or whatever. It's like, maybe we should address that before we worry about, the McGill Big Three or some other little basic things. Like maybe just get stronger for a while.
There's a ratio to it all, right?
Yeah.
We're missing something if your numbers are that far apart.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's like, ultimately, I just don't think people can afford not to. And I've always said to my patients, I'm like, I've never had a patient that came in, because people have theories why they're in the pain they're in. Not one of them says, hey, I think my low back hurts because it's too strong.
Yeah.
Right? Exactly. Now, again, would I identify deadlift as a low back exercise? No. Is it involved? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I find is if you can prioritize the glute and hamstrings in the deadlift, low back then does what he's designed to do.
Yeah.
And ultimately, what I do for a living, one of the many descriptions I've come up with is that I teach people how to use their bodies the way they're anatomically designed.
Yeah. I always used to tell people, like, so if you're lifting something, it's like, if we're just using our low backs, like, do you want to be pulling with a golf cart or do you want to be pulling with a semi? It's like your glutes and hamstrings, like that's a semi.
There you go. Yeah.
Like, what do you think is going to be more efficient there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Beautiful. I love it. Cool. Let's talk about traits of successful clients. What have you found are the winning traits that our successful clients have?
I mean, the biggest thing to me is just consistency. I mean, I know that's like beating the drum like everyone else is saying it too, but again, even a really crappy program, if you're consistent with it, can yield results. And
Absolutely.
It's just those clients that realize, like, they're ahead of time. Like, they're like, hey, 2 weeks from now I'm traveling. What can I do while I'm there? Or, can you send me a workout? Or how can I make this up? Like, those are the people that tend to succeed. Like, obviously we're all going to have travel. Like, you're never going to have a time in your life where nothing comes up, but it's like, how are you adapting to that? Instead of just saying like, well, I missed Wednesday's workout, I guess I'll just, whatever. It's like, okay, can I at least do towel workout in the hotel gym, or like, use a dumbbell in the hotel gym or whatever. It's like finding something so you at least stay somewhat on track versus just saying, well, I'm on vacation, I can't possibly work out.
Sure.
Like, I couldn't possibly get a guest pass at the barbell club and go and like get in a workout.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes it's not on people's radars, right?
Yeah.
And, for I think a lot of people, we overcomplicate things. We'll get to that today, I'm sure. But I agree with you. I think consistency and discipline, right, are some of the traits that I would say successful clients have. And I think that's all prefaced with, and we talked about this a little bit before we started the podcast, but self-efficacy. The ability to want to invest in myself to get better and to improve.
Totally.
And then that's when those other two have to come into play. So I think you're right. I think people also, if I had add another trait, it was probably patience.
Yeah, that's huge.
And recognizing that this is a process, that they didn't get to where they're at overnight, assuming that there's something functionally, aesthetically, or things that they're wanting to change. We didn't get there overnight, so we're likely not going to change it overnight.
Yeah.
And so I just think having the respect for the time that it takes and the discipline to keep showing up, even when after a week you don't look the way you want to look, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, it's just not being a victim to your schedule. Like, everyone's busy, and it's amazing how people can get really bad at like not putting themselves first. And not, again, you don't want to become a narcissist either, but at the same point, sometimes you just have to say like, I need to run to the gym and get, even get in a quick workout versus just saying like, well, a meeting came up and nothing can be done.
You're absolutely right. And I can't tell you how many times a week I talk to people about that very thing of saying, look, the only way you're going to be successful in this is if you prioritize this in your life as a non-negotiable. And that means planning your day around your workout, not your workout around your day.
Yeah.
Because if you do the latter, it's going to get shelved.
Yeah. Exactly.
Always.
Like, we've all got kids or jobs or whatever.
Everybody's
like,
busy. And I tell people all the time,
happens.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, you want to compare schedules?
Yeah.
I'm like, trust me, I've had some wild times in my life where I still managed to stay on my fitness. Now, did it look the way that it always looks? Yeah. No. Did I have to modify things? Absolutely. there was a time in my life where we were about to have our first baby. Like my wife was going to pop. We were moving out of the house that we had just sold, building another one, moving in with my mother, putting the rest of our life in storage. I was working full-time at the clinic. I was working on opening the barbell club at the time. We also own a salon, and she was still working, and we still had that running. We had all these moving parts, right? And then on top of it, we were in a musical, my wife and I both. We had practice twice a week for this musical, and then I had to find time to practice for practice, right? So, and I was doing personal training on top of it all still. I was doing training, I think, 1 or 2 days a week. So with all of that, I still managed to get my 3 days in a week. And people overcomplicate it, right? I can get everything done in 3 days, but on those 3 days, I literally had 30 minutes to train, 30 to 45 minutes. So if it was my leg day, I would warm up, I would squat, I would be done. If it was my push day, same thing, warm up, I would press, I'm out. And I did that for as long as I needed to, but I kept it in as a non-negotiable. And then with time and things, you know, fluctuating like they do, I'm able to get back to this now routine where, okay, I have more time to throw at it. Now I can get a 4th day every once in a while, whatever, what have you. But you've got to be willing to have it plugged in as a non-negotiable.
Yeah, exactly. It's like accepting that, yes, a shortened workout is better than no workout. I try and with my online client stuff now, I try and put that in like my entry email, kind of explain like, hey, if you're busy, here's how to cut from your workout. You know, like if you have to skip bicep curls and leg extensions or whatever, like that's fine. Like you said,
absolutely.
You got your squat, your bench, your deadlift in. Like I think Jim Wendler in 531 talked about that. It's like literally if all you did was those 3 lifts, you're still going to make progress. You might not make as fast a progress, but at least you're not falling backwards.
Well, and here's the deal. That's the meat and potatoes, right? I tell people, I'm like, there's a reason I named it the Barbell Club, right? And I've talked to a lot of people. I'm like, if you got just really good at 5 movements and for the rest of your life, all you did was squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press, and a bent over barbell row, you could be a scary mofo.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, you could reach physique goals. You could, all of these things, like especially with your compound movements. So prioritize those. And that's what I tell my clients. I go, if you're short on time, for the love of God, stop working the hot tub muscles.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're like, oh, I got 40 minutes and I see you doing a bicep curl, I'm canceling your membership.
Well, and it's like, at the very least, like if you end up with 5-10 minutes at the end, you can throw in a quick burnout set on those, but it's like,
or throw them in as a superset or something. But I'm like prioritize. I always tell people, prioritize the muscles on your axial skeleton prior to your appendicular. And that's just a fancy way of saying the muscles on your trunk are your bigger, more efficient prime movers, burn more calories, do all these things more so than the muscles, again, on your appendages. So
I used to explain that like when I'd have like, you know, a new member and you're showing them around the gym, and it kind of explained like, okay, yes, leg extensions are cool, all those things, like they help, but they're just not efficient. You know, like if you've got all the time in the workout, sure, hit every isolation exercise you want to hit. But it's like, if I can just squat, bench, and deadlift and hit every muscle to some degree, that seems a lot more efficient to me.
Absolutely, man. And again, I named it the Barbell Club for a reason. When you walk through the Barbell Club, it is slammed with equipment. All the isolation opportunities you can handle. But nothing beats the basics.
Yeah, exactly.
For that.
You can always add on.
Absolutely. Always. Cool. Next, let's talk programming. And with programming, right, we could do a whole podcast probably on programming, but let's run at programming for like, let's start by talking about maybe like basic level, like entry level and like mid-range strength trainers. Let's talk programming. Let's hear your thoughts on that.
So I've definitely changed a lot on that. I used to kind of follow the idea of like, you know, you have to goblet squat this much before you can do a barbell squat. And I mean, I'll still start a lot of people there. But to me, it's like, we just meet them where they're at. I mean, that's kind of the point of having an assessment. It's like, if I see someone and they're just rocking goblet squats on day one, and also goal dependent, like if they want to do a powerlifting meet in 6 months, like we're not going to spend 3 months goblet squatting.
Yeah, right.
But it's like, you know, also if they really suck at squatting and they can't squat without tipping over, it's like, we're going to probably spend a lot of time on just say goblet squats or, you know, start with remaining deadlifts instead of regular deadlifts. And I tend to blend a lot of things. Like I will use RPE, but I actually still just love a lot of good percentage-based stuff. And depends on where someone's at. Like I used to just be as basic as just following like, you know, starting strength with people. And it's like, it's not the greatest program in the world, but if someone's starting out, it also works really well for a long time. Like we could maybe make faster progress with say RPE or something like that. But if someone's adding 5 pounds a week to something, like I kind of hate to mess up progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I like that. There's a lot of good things in there that you said. One of them was meeting people where they're at, right? That's, again, underrated and undervalued when it comes to trainers. And for anyone watching this, if you're thinking about getting a personal trainer and you're choosing one, these are things to consider for you too. Is like, I want to find someone that's going to assess how I move, right? And then meet me where I'm at. Yeah. And that just doesn't mean also my ability to perform, but also like, what are my goals? Yeah. Why are we doing this?
Exactly. If every client of theirs does the exact same program, like, I'm not really sure what you're paying for. I mean, I guess if they're charging you really, really cheap rates, you're like, okay, maybe this is better than nothing. But at the same point, it's like, I don't know, like there should be some level of individualization. Like it's personal training for a reason.
Exactly. And the cookie cutter thing has never done it for me. Now, is there a ton of similarities on movement selection, and things like that? Absolutely. Yeah. But how I cue someone or correct someone's squat is completely individual, based on what I'm seeing on mobility restrictions. Maybe one person it has to do with their ankle, and the next person it has to do with their hips, right? Yeah. So I'm adding that specificity. And you reminded me when I lived in Cheyenne for a while. I was a member of 3 different gyms, and I would just pick and choose depending on what I was training that day, where I wanted to go, etc., what time of day. And there was this one gym, and every time I would go into the gym, I shit you not, it didn't matter what day of the week, what time of day, there was this one trainer, and he always had this group of like 3 or 4 like soccer moms. And I swear to you, every time I never saw him doing anything else but ball slams with these ladies. They would stand in a circle and they were just ball slamming. You're
you're paying for this.
I was like, this is wild. Yeah. The first like 3 times I'm like, this is a coincidence. Yeah. Like this, I happened to be here. Every time, man, it was like ball slams. And I'm like, okay, well, there's that. Yeah. So, I think adding specificity is important. With the programming for me, I think I've found, like, as I continue to talk to people and, see what's out there, and everyone has their opinions, but I'm pretty loose on it. And I think, in the more we can get people to intuitively train and listen to their bodies, I think that's also important. And that's one of the things I try to help guide people in as well. You talked about RPE, right, which is acronym for rate of perceived exertion. I think that's valuable. I put out some videos on that, and I think why that's valuable, because if it's just the numbers game, at some point you're going to start spinning your wheels and you're going to start getting frustrated, especially if you've been doing it for a long time. Yeah. If it's just the numbers game for me, well, then I've been plateaued for a while, right? It also depends on where you're at in your training and things like that. But, off of like percentages, like, so for me personally, I've never trained on a percentage. Never. Even on all 3 of my powerlifting meets, never. But again, I've been doing it long enough that I've gotten pretty good at knowing my body and intuitively making adjustments and doing things like that. So I think percentages still have their place. I just have never used them, personally. And I think for a lot of my people, for the programming I do with them, there's so many things that need to get in line and preface really intense program specifics that there's not a ton that I really get to those levels with.
And I think that's where, again, I've started to realize, like, because initially it was like everyone I gave percentage based on. Yeah. And it works, like you said, until it doesn't. It's like, oh, cool. Like, you had family in town and you didn't sleep for 3 days and all sorts of stuff. It's like, we're probably not going to be able to hit that exact thing. And that's where sometimes an RPE can be nice, where it's like, all right, just hit whatever feels heavy for a 3 today or something, instead of trying to hit this exact same one.
Absolutely. Were you basing off 1 rep maxes? Percentages off 1 rep?
Yeah, but I'm also, again, I definitely train some people so like I have one girl who's at Worlds for Powerlifting, but most of my people tend to be more like hobbyist. Yeah. And so I do percentage stuff, but it's like I probably take off 5% of what we'd actually be going for, just because, again, they don't, we want their 1 rep max to go up, but it's not like life or death for them. So it's like, if we can still just get there gradually by following, pretty laid out program, like I'd rather do that and not beat them up.
Agreed. Yeah. And I think I was talking to someone the other day. There's been times where I think that there's maybe more often than not, your 3 rep max might be more valuable to you than your 1. Totally. Yeah. Because there's so many variables that have to align to hit your 1 rep max. Ask anyone that's done powerlifting, right? There's so many variables. So I don't know it's always as measurable as we think it is. Because even that alone, right? If you're okay, well, today's your testing day. Yeah. But you slept like shit yesterday, and then you're stressed because you lost whatever, right? Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of variables going into that, and I'm with you. I think rate of perceived exertion, and what I find generally, it's my opinion, my own humble opinion, that I think if you took like 10 of your regular gym goers that have been at it for several years and, work pretty hard, getting some results, but, just kind of in some ways going through the motions a little bit, that category, I feel like 7 out of 10 of them probably stop their top working set when they have, without exaggerating, probably 7
for sure.
to 8 reps in reserve.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Huge
Totally agree.
reps in reserve. And so, getting people guided through the scary, murky waters of working sets, I think is important, because that's where we facilitate the most change. But again, there's things that need to preface that. How are we moving? Why are we moving this way? How efficient are we in some of those things that help keep us safe, right? In those times.
So because again, squat, bench, deadlift, I rarely take people to failure on, because I don't think there's a point most of the time.
Sure.
But so for something like, say, curls, that's actually kind of like a rite of passage we have, where it's like, okay, I'm going to have you just, we put whatever on the easy bar, and actually tell them, I'm like, go until you feel that you would stop. And then it's like, all right, there, they hit 15, probably there. And I'm like, okay, now keep going until I tell you to stop. And it's usually 30 to 40 reps.
Isn't that wild? Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's like, okay, this is why your arms haven't changed, because you're stopping RPE -10.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course it's not changing.
Yeah. And so help guiding people into that, and just kind of exposing that a little bit, and getting them to understand just what they're capable of.
Yeah,
people don't give themselves enough credit. I can't tell you how many wide-eyed looks I've got from clients, especially women, when I choose weight for them. And they're like,
no, I can do that.
Yeah. And then they do a perfect set of 15, and they're like, I would have never done that if you weren't here. And I'm like, right.
So one of my first clients, we were doing trap bar deadlifts, which I would say also now I consider to be overrated to a degree.
Okay.
I think they're great.
They have their place. Agreed. Overrated.
They're not the be all end all.
No.
So I had this lady, and she's just like, there's no way I can deadlift over 150. I've been training for 6 months. I'm like, I know you can deadlift over 150. So I got her talking. We used kind of some different plates than we normally used. Put 155 on the bar. I'm like, all right, just do this for 5. Just knocks out 5 reps, and it's still an RPE 5. And I kind of told her, and she's like, no way, that couldn't have been that. It's like,
where you sneak the weight on?
Yeah, it's
I do that also.
This was just a mental block. This was not a physical block, and that's all the time with people.
Absolutely.
And it's always the round numbers too. 100 scary, but 105 is somehow not scary.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. You have these markers in your head, and honestly, I get to try to get people to understand what you're doing is you're controlling your central nervous system. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I go, picture your central nervous system as a very out of shape, fat bald man standing in the corner of the room yelling, "You're gonna die."
Yeah.
If you do another rep, right? And it's and you do another rep, that one more rep philosophy, it's on the shirt, right? One more rep, and then he goes, huh. Well, if you do another one, you're going to die now.
Yeah.
And it's the more you train that, and it's oh, I can do more. Oh, I can do more. But you're still doing it with the intention of where you're moving from. And what I try to get my people to do, when you get into the really hard reps, nothing changes. Your tempo doesn't change. Your range of motion doesn't change.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of times with mine, if I watch my videos back as I am checking form and stuff, my tempo will even slow down on my last heavier reps.
Just to be sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So just getting people to understand that. And so many people don't give themselves enough credit, even people that have been training for a long time.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine, Neil, I'm going to call you out on this. My buddy, I went to high school in Utah, and he's a buddy I played sports with, and a good close friend of mine. I was there visiting. This was several years ago, but we were going to get a session together. And we were going to do some deadlifts, and I was like, "Well, what do you want to hit for deads today? What kind of reps and sets you want to do?" And he goes, "Well," and I don't remember what the number was. I think maybe it was 455 or 405. It might have been 405. It was 400 something. And he goes, "Well, I'm hoping," and I thought he was joking. Because he goes, because I've known him for a while, right? And we've trained together. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm hoping to," and whatever the number was, he threw it out. "I'm hoping to hit that in 3 months." And I was waiting for the punchline. And I was like, "Oh, you're serious?" Yeah. I go, "You're pulling that today, and you're pulling it for 5.
Yeah.
And guess what? He pulled it for a couple sets.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Huh." And I was like, "Yeah, bro." I was like, "It's there." And and we tweaked his movement a little bit though too. So in all fairness, we did change how he was moving. But it's there. It's there if you give it a chance and you learn how to connect and overcome the inner bitch a little bit, right?
It's amazing though how you either have that where it's the person who's they could add so much more if they just had the confidence. Or you have the other, like the high school boy philosophy where they're like, you know, they can't do 135. Well, it's like, oh no, my bench, and it's like, I'm just going to jump to 200 next. And you're like,
right.
Can we find a middle ground for this, please? Like, yeah, don't be a wimp, but also don't be insane on it.
Absolutely. And that point you just made brings me to one of the points I wanted to bring up when it comes to programming. One of the things that I try to educate people on a lot, and I'm sure you do this, especially with your big compounds, but people undervalue and don't utilize acclimation sets enough.
Yeah.
Right? So let's explain to the people, what is an acclimation set and why are they necessary?
So I'm assuming you're talking about just like sub-max volume basically, and just kind of getting
so my first working load is going to be 455. Why am I not going from 135 to 455?
Yeah, again, same. It just comes down to me, that nervous system. Typically it's like there's a lot of times you can miss a lift just because you took way too big a jump, and it's like your muscles are ready but your nervous system was not ready to fire for that. And it's like, and again, that's something you just learn with more experience, where you're like, okay, I can make this jump but I can't make that jump. It's like that weight is possible, but I might have to take one more warm-up set to get there or whatever, just to be ready for it.
And I think a lot of people, if they've been lifting, they're serious about it, they have an irrational fear towards acclimation sets, that it's going to rob them of being able to do what they want in their working sets. And I go, no, actually it's going to give you better success. And again, when you do these acclimation sets, you're not doing like sets of 15 there.
No.
You're just feeling the weight. So maybe it's, you know, and it'll vary. And like for me, again, it's a lot by feel. And I use like 455 as an example. I mean, that's a big number. But for some people, even if let's say 225 is the bench that I'm hoping to hit that day. Okay, so maybe I'm warming up. Maybe I'm feeling the bar, getting the pattern down a little bit. Then maybe I do start at 135, right?
Yeah.
But then maybe I'm going to feel a couple at 155. And then, or maybe I felt 3 reps there. Then maybe when I go to 185, I unrack it. I do 1 rep, do 2 reps, not sure how I'm going to do, but after 2, I'm like, yeah, I think that feels about right.
Yeah.
And then maybe I just feel, you know, whatever. It's 205, but you're just stepping up. And then, like you said, you're acclimating your central nervous system to these loads so that it doesn't throw off so many red flags once you unrack that heavier load.
And I think there's something too to like just getting some weight or some reps in with weight not being like the thing that you're thinking about the most. Because like if you're trying to like perfect your technique, if your max is 225 and we start at 225, all you can think about is don't die. Like, you know, if you throw on like say 135, that's light enough now where you can actually think like, oh, my elbow's not, you know, tracking, you know, whatever it is you're trying to fix. But like, you can't fix anything under a max load.
No,
like,
absolutely not.
And obviously you're not going to make lifelong changes under a 45-pound bar either. But at the same point, like, it just gives you a little more practice.
It does, yeah. And I think the load is important too, you know, when we talk about that is so we're talking about acclimation. So you're giving your body a chance, and like, yeah, maybe you warmed up already. Maybe you did your 10 minutes on the echo bike and like, oh, I'm warm, I got blood moving, sure. But now you're warming up to the movement pattern. You're warming up to the idea of what's my primary movers? Where do I want to feel this the most? Because that is undervalued, I think, even with like my power lifters. If I get my power lifters to get the mindset of a bodybuilder a little bit more, it makes them better. And I also think it keeps them safer.
Oh, totally.
Because now we're moving with intention. And at some point, the compound movement is a compound movement. And I'm going to use all the joints and all the muscles to move the weight, especially for powerlifting. But I still want some accountability to what should be working the most here. And the acclimation sets allow that and really open up the doors for, again, greater success when you get to the heavier loads that you're really trying to hit. So don't worry about, you know, wearing yourself out. Obviously, pay attention to how many reps and things like that. But I think people would have greater success at heavier loads if they acclimate appropriately. Yeah,
and so do you have a specific percentage used, or is Q is kind of like based on feel? Or
it's really based on feel. And so when I'm guiding clients through it, it's based on how they perform the rep, what it looks like to me. I've been doing this long enough that I've got a pretty, you know, sensitive intuition on like,
when you just know like, okay, this person can make a 40-pound jump, this person can't. Like, some people just need more, some need less. And obviously I don't know those things until we really get into the relationship further with the client. And so that's why, like, on day one, one of the things that I do day one with all my clients, it's super important to me, and one of the things I'm most passionate about with everybody is getting them to be able to differentiate with the bottom of a squat versus the bottom of a deadlift. Because I feel like there's so many other things that cue off of that, that I feel like that's always where I start day one. And it also is a really nice way for me to get an assessment on how do these people move generally. And those are global enough movements that it gives me a lot of information about thoracic spine, ankle mobility,
knee, like all sorts of stuff. So that's one of the reasons that I kind of start there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't do a percentage for the acclimation sets per se. Once I've been with the client long enough, it's kind of an intuitive thing, knowing on how they move.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. It's like you just know, like, if your bench is 135, it's going to be a different warm-up set than if your bench is 175. Like, it's
100%. Yeah, and I think, for people that are listening and thinking about, hey, how do I acclimate on my stuff? Same thing. You know how you feel, right? You know what certain loads feel like. And if you're going to try to have your first working set be at 275, then consider, like, what's my best steps getting there, so that I'm prepared.
Exactly. I'd always say, like, err on the side of being too light.
Yeah.
Because if you by the time you get to your working sets, you're kind of actually gassed.
Yeah.
Well, then next time you probably did a little bit too much. But, like, I'd rather do that than try and make some gigantic jump and all of a sudden you're like, Jesus, this feels heavy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Cool. So let's talk kind of transition on programming. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe programming could be part of this too, but what are some of the main differences you think there are, if any? Because maybe there's not as many as some people think, between training for men and women.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's very little. Yeah. I find typically women can handle more volume, probably a little more intensity too. But in general, it's not. Again, all my women, for the most part, we all do bench or squat or deadlift. Like, the only change is really based on, like, injury history. Like, if you have a jacked up shoulder and you don't care to compete in powerlifting, we're probably not going to bench press. But in general, it's like, if we want to get you strong, we're going to bench press, we're going to squat, we're going to deadlift. Like, we maybe do a little more glute work just because that tends to be more of a goal for a lot of my female clients. Mm-hmm. But short of that, it's shockingly little, I feel like, is different.
Agreed. Yeah, I think people muddy the waters, man, and overcomplicate things again, right? On, like, what are our training differences, and what has to be this, has to be that. What's the number one concern you get from female clients? And you might not get as much as I do, but I think people probably know where I'm going with this. What are females clients' biggest concerns about entering the world?
Yeah. So funny enough, I gave a talk at an NSCA conference last year, and that was actually one of the things I talked about in there is, like, thank God last year's for Instagram, where I don't get that concern nearly as much. I mean, you still get it.
Agreed.
For sure.
Agreed.
But, like, 8 years ago, it was like every girl, like, Tony Gentlecore had a piece about this, how is it you could hand someone a 100-pound kettlebell and they're like, oh, they can lift this all day, but you hand them a 100-pound barbell and they're like, oh, I'm going to get bulky. And it's like, it's the weight's weight, like, who cares?
Absolutely. But, well, or you'll get, I've had these moms, right? And they're slinging around. They got a kid on this hip, a kid on this hip, and a diaper bag that's loaded with God knows what and weighs 150 pounds. Yeah. But then they're worried about these 15-pound dumbbells I'm going to have them lift, that it's going to make them look like me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, talking about the difference between men and women, I've had a lot of people sit across from my desk, on intake day, and, as I'm getting the medical questionnaire and getting to know them, and any history that's going to be relative to their training. And I've had a lot of people sit across from me like, well, I don't want to look like you.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm like, well, then here's your money back, because that's what I do with everybody,
Yeah, that's my goal, like the beard and all. Like.
Exactly. Yeah. It should only take a month, and then oops, I'm big.
Sorry.
Oops, I look like Luke. Yeah. So
I've been stuck this way for 20 years. Yeah.
Exactly. So there's some pretty big misconceptions, I think, for people, men or women, when they're first getting into it, on, like, just how hard it is to get to that. And I'm with you. I don't think the differences are that much. The differences are going to be based less for me on gender and more on, like, what are their goals?
Yeah.
And what injuries are we training around? What musculoskeletal disorders do we need to modify various movements for? Yeah. And that's what differentiates things more for me.
I used to think, because it used to be like at the end of every female session, I do like abs and glutes. Every male session you finish with arms, and you realize like some girls really want arms too. So it's
some girls really want arms.
Yeah, it's like it just depends on the person. It's like some people don't care about their glutes, but they really like good arms. Like all right, we're gonna do arms. Like shocking. Like we're gonna make this personal.
Exactly. Yeah. Doing away with the cookie cutter stuff, right? And giving people what they want. That's important.
Be better than Women's Health magazine, like.
But you're right. Social media has been a huge help.
Yeah.
Of just getting people exposed.
Yeah.
And fitness and strength training is on fire right now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
As one of my missions for the Barbell Club is to expose as many people to strength training as possible, because it's a tributary of positivity into every avenue of their life.
Well, it's like even if you're trying to lose weight, it's like it just gives us more metrics to see progress. Because even on your weight loss, you're going to plateau at some point, but you can also be excited because you hit a squat PR this week, or you just deadlifted this for the first time. It's like weight loss PRs are not linear, so it's like you might go a few weeks without losing weight. So it's like, we need something else positive to focus on other than just, am I getting smaller?
Yeah. And I think that brings up a topic that we should probably hit here. It's not on our list, but I think it's a hot enough topic that there's probably gonna be people that find this podcast that they're gonna find value in it. Let's talk about that scary thing called weight loss a little bit. And because I know I have some opinions on it, and the things that I try to help people understand and guide them through the idea of weight loss. And I guess to set it up, I'll just start it with this and then get your thoughts. I explain to people that I kind of correct them. I'm like, oh, actually, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that your goal isn't weight loss.
It's fat loss.
Your goal is body composition change.
Yeah.
Right. So setting that up, let's hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I tend to like pretty basic stuff. Like I did my precision nutrition cert a few years ago, and I wouldn't say that I follow like everything they do 100%, but yeah, to me, a lot of it just comes down to habits. Like some people don't need to count calories. I still like counting calories for most people, but it's like everyone just thinks it's like, oh, I just got to cut out carbs. And it's like, okay, you can do that and you'll probably lose some weight, but it's going to be mostly water weight and you're going to feel like death. Like I just like, honestly, for a lot of people, it's like, I want a calorie number and I want a protein number. The rest of it, like as long as you're not like, below 20% carbs or below 20% fat, like it all works.
Sure.
And like, I just feel some people are more receptive to fats, some more receptive to carbs. So I'm like, as long as you're hitting your protein, your calories, like we're going to see changes. Like, again, if you're going to get show lean, we're going to have to get a lot more specific. But it's like if you're 30 pounds overweight, we don't have to do that crazy of stuff to lose weight.
Absolutely. I talk about this in the YouTube video that's dropping today, Phil. Yeah, we got a YouTube vlog dropping on my personal page, dropping today, and I talk about this very thing. Just again, not overcomplicating it, and the next topic kind of on our list is nutrition basics, but just honing in again on like, hey, we're not after weight loss. I give a basic example, and I grabbed it. You know who Chris Aceto is?
I know the name, yeah.
Yeah, if I'm pronouncing his last name right, but he's a trainer of many bodybuilding pros, trained Jay Cutler, and kind of a guru in the industry. But in one of his books, he talks about the body composition idea, and he gives an example of, and I talked about this in another podcast, but if I had someone, let's say, that weighed 250 pounds and extreme tightened up nutrition, started doing a ton of cardio, and 2 months later, we take their weight, and let's say they drop 20 pounds. All right. So we're down to 230. Amazing. Drop 20 pounds. Feeling awesome. Well, when we took their body fat before they started, let's say it was 25%. Check their body fat again after they lost 20 pounds, still 25%.
Yeah. Because
they lost weight.
Yeah.
So musculoskeletal, right?
Yeah.
And adipose tissue both move together. Now you take that same person and you add clean nutrition, and you add cardio, and you add strength training, which is what I reference as the happy triad. Yeah. You add those, and then after 2 months, we weigh that person, they're only down 10 pounds. But now we check their body fat, and they lost 5%.
Yeah.
So that's what we're after. The scale is so deceiving, and the scale is just not as an objective tool as we often think it is. Not nearly as valuable as the objective measure of how do I look and how do I feel. And, am I losing inches and things like that? There's like other ways to measure.
Only you know what the scale says. Like, unless you're broadcasting it for some weird reason.
Sure.
But like, in general, it's like, if you look better, you look better. It's like, who cares if the scale says the same? If people are coming up to you and be like, wow, you look like you've really changed. Like, who cares? And like, that's the goal anyways. Like
Absolutely.
We get so weirdly attached to certain numbers. It tends to be like this weird obsession with round numbers, like 120 for every female. It's like, well, but what if you look your best at 135? Like, why do we want to be 120 then?
Absolutely.
Like, you're probably just under muscled. Actually, is probably where the look you're going for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. So, so let's let that lead into the next topic of just nutrition basics. And you already touched on some of them a little bit. But what are some things that you like to give people as just basic ideas or principles to start with?
To me, it's just one thing is just putting in a protein at every meal. I mean, it's been said 1,000 times, but it's shocking still how often you'll hear someone say like, oh, I had a salad and this. It's like, okay, but what did you have for protein? It's like, oh, I had an egg. And you're like, an egg. Like,
oh, I had a spoonful of peanut butter.
Yeah, 6 grams. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, that's a fat source.
Yeah.
Not a protein source. So yes, it has protein in it, but so yeah, I'm with you. It's like, let's not overcomplicate it.
Yeah.
Let's eat less of the shit foods. We all know what those are.
Yeah.
And let's start eating more clean whole foods more often.
Yeah.
And I'm with you. I'm like, let's nail the protein macronutrient first. So let's go, okay, we're going to shoot for this many grams of protein a day, divvied up between all the times you eat.
Yep.
Pretty basic math. And then just getting people to understand that with your other 2 macronutrients, right, because we're dividing them into protein, carbs, and fats, your carbs and your fats are your energy source. And I'm going to have you use one or the other instead of stacking them really heavily together.
Yeah.
Right? And so just getting people to start with some of those really super simple basics.
So my friend Polly, who's a trainer over in Helena, he actually had a really good post in this theory. He said, actually, a lot of you, because there's a 4th macronutrient, obviously, which is alcohol.
Yeah.
He said a lot of you would probably be making a lot more fat. He's like, if you just, and again, I'm not, like, I'll still drink occasionally. I don't have an issue against it, but it's like, it's insane how much just comes from alcohol for a lot of people. It's like,
people don't get
that,
it.
you can fix a lot of stuff just with that.
The booze, man, and not to mention what it's doing for inflammation processes in the body.
Yeah, your workout sucks the next day, and
it's wild, man. And so they've even done studies on like serum testosterone levels being lower after consuming alcohol, like all these things, right? So again, like I don't care if you drink, but just recognize how does that fit into what my goals are, and know that it's empty calories.
Yeah. Well,
empty calories.
And it's kind of like anything. I don't care what anyone does. Just don't complain to me that we don't hit your goal. Like,
for sure.
If you're willing to accept, like, hey, I'm going to have this, and I accept that this is going to, like, lengthen my phase or whatever, fine. Go right ahead. But, like, don't also come to me and then say, well, why am I doing this? Like, well, dude, you don't track ever on weekends. Like, shocking that we're not hitting where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, I got in a debate one time. It was with my dad, actually, and he informed me that before he'd go to the gym, he was taking a shot of tequila or vodka. I think maybe it was vodka. And I was like, yeah, maybe don't do that. And he's like, well, it's calorie. What did he say? I don't know if he said it was calorie free or he's
carb free.
Carb free. He's like, well, there's no carbohydrates. I'm like, right, but it still has calories. He goes, well, it doesn't. He goes, how? And I'm like, it has alcohol. So like calories, like it's like things that will burn for fuel.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I told him, I was like, one ounce of like well vodka has like anywhere from 60 to 70 calories in it. Yeah. Like,
and just again, drinking before work, I generally not like.
Of course.
I mean, I've seen people. There's actually a girl my wife compete against. She would actually do a shot of Jack Daniels before her last deadlift attempt, just to get out of her own head. Sure. Again, case in point, like sometimes there's little cases, but in general, it's like, yeah, especially if you're gonna be doing anything over like 5 reps, I can't imagine doing that after drinking.
I know. I've been to, I've competed 6 times in bodybuilding, and there's a lot of bodybuilders that use alcohol to try to help bring out vascularity and things like that. And I'm like, right, but.
It's a bold strategy.
It's bold, but yeah. Plus, you're also dehydrated already, and that's going to dehydrate you more, which I guess. But then you're also increasing inflammation. So then, do you have a chance to hang on to some of the water? It's just, I don't know. Again, teach their own, but it's just recognizing that hey, some of these basics are what's going to get you there, and then ultimately just the discipline to do it over and over again. And
there was a coach I listened to recently. He said, actually, if we change them from calling them the basics to calling them the staples, he's like, I think a lot more people would do them more often because it's like people hear basics and everyone always assumes like even though they've never lifted weights, they're too good for the basics or too good to do the basics for nutrition. It's like
sure,
so it's like if we phrase it as the staples, maybe it'd have a little more of a catch of like, oh yeah, this is what I have to do. Yeah. The rest of it, it's like, whether you do your cardio fasted or non-fasted, it's like. If you're still getting like a Dairy Queen Blizzard after every workout, it's like maybe address that first.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, but I think so. People are so in to give people the benefit of the doubt. I think the reason that people overcomplicate it is because they're eager to reach their goals, right? Totally. And so I think that's awesome. But
it's always well intentioned.
It's always has good intention behind it. And a good friend of mine that I helped kind of guide through a really fantastic transformation when he started. We were lifting and it was like week 1. And I remember he came to me because he had been doing some research on his own. And I think his question was something to the effect of, well, how many grams of fat should I be eating a day? And I was like, bro, let's start here. And so I was just like, same thing. I was like, let's eat less of these things and the more of these things. And for him, when we started, just what I said earlier, I started him with, here's how many grams of protein you're going to eat a day. Yeah. Right. And then, And we also built him food banks. I found that to be helpful for people. And I'll be like, here's some good ideas for lean protein sources. Yeah. Here's good idea for complex carbohydrate sources. Here's good ideas for fat sources. Yeah. Just so that, because people don't.
People don't know what they don't know.
Yeah. Exactly. And so even for me, sometimes I take for granted that just sometimes people don't know. So I think getting them to understand like, hey, because then now visually in my mind, I've got these 3 food banks and I'm just pulling from those to build my meals, Yeah. And I know that this one is what builds my body, and these 2 are what fuel it. Yeah. And then again, we get this basic understanding. We start getting our brain wrapped around it on how to eat. Yep. Now we can do this whether it's meals that I've prepped or I don't lose my mind when I'm at a restaurant because I can still use those same fundamentals or those staples, as we've said.
Once you've been doing it long enough, it's easy. Like you go to the restaurant and within 5 seconds, you can tell what your best options are.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily common knowledge. And it's like, I think that's one thing is growing as a trainer is like, just because you know these things is realizing like, that's not obvious to everyone else. Like they can't just look at a menu and be like, oh, that's going to not be good for me. This, that. It's like, they just go based on that looks like it tastes good. Done.
Sure.
That must be the best.
Or if the menu shows the calories, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no. And so you're right. It just circles back to like meeting people where they're at. So yeah, again, maybe not the basics, but the staples, sticking with those because man, those will take you a really long ways.
Exactly.
So, all right, man, this is going to be a fun one. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. Gym pet peeves.
Cliche one would be just like the circuit people, which again, I think circuits can be awesome, but when you're taking up like 5 machines at once and just not letting people work in. Again, if you're going to come at the middle of the day when it's dead and do that, cool. But you know, the people that come at like the busy time of day and just like, oh, I'm going to use this machine, all at once, no one else can hop in for the next 45 minutes.
Sure.
Like, not a favorite. My brother's actually complaining because today he was at the gym. He said there's this one guy, every time he goes there, always hogs one of the adjustable dumbbell benches and he will do like 60 minutes on it, you know, because he'll do like 5 different exercises. And it's just like, good Lord, can you like share at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. There's all sorts of them, and like I don't know that any of them are really that big for me. But I was trying to think. I was like, all right, what are some of mine over the years? And one of mine is the I'm loud just for the sake of being loud.
Yeah, no one cares, dude.
And that could be the fact that that you're a screamer.
Yeah.
Whether you're stretching your hamstrings or you're warming up, you're screaming.
Yep.
That I don't have a lot of tolerance for. Like when we start getting to some heavy loads, I'm like, yeah, man, make a little noise. Like I don't,
everything's situation dependent.
Everything has, there's like always like a caveat to some of those things. But noise for the sake of noise, and it's not always like the grunting.
Yeah.
It's also the people where like everything has to be loud.
Yeah.
When I rack this barbell, I'm going to do it as loud as possible, no matter how much weight's on it.
Seen them.
When I put the dumbbells away on the rack, I'm going to make sure that that's loud.
Yeah.
When I put plates away, and I'm like, everything is just so loud.
Yeah. I remember like this college kid who used to work out at my gym, and he'd be doing Olympic lifts. And obviously you do have to drop.
Absolutely.
I get that.
Absolutely.
But he would just throw it
He would put some extra oomph behind
like,
it.
Dude, you're snatching 135. No one cares. Like, again, if you're doing world records, show off. But it's like, you got to hit a certain level to justify doing certain things like that.
Yeah, little things like that. I give some of my power lifters a hard time because of their vacations that they take between their sets, and I'm like, as a fellow power lifter, I've never rested that long.
Yeah.
And if I was programming for you, I would never have you rest that long.
Yeah.
At some point, I just don't think it's beneficial.
No, exactly. It's like they go basically eat a whole meal and then come back.
It's wild. And then so you talk about like eating up time on then that power cage is out of use now for 3 hours. And so I just think obviously you're going to rest longer between your heavier sets, but it's like also not resting too long because like what if you're at your meet and what if things get expedited way quicker and you don't get your usual 15-minute break that you got.
Yeah, you got to have some work capacity.
Yeah, so it's just finding that balance. But I think gym pet peeves are an interesting one. There's lots of pages like gym fails and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Ultimately at the barbell club, right, I don't want it to be a place where like people feel self-conscious.
So
right?
that would actually say, so like you said, most of these anymore I don't get that concerned about. That's one that bugs me. Is I'm so sick of gym fails. Like, I know a lot of them anymore are just staged anyways, but like, that's one that gets me is like, you're filming some stranger just to make fun of him. Like that, like, again, back when they first started, I think we all kind of laughed at it.
Yeah. There's some funny ones here and there.
You start to put yourself in their shoes and realize like,
and you're like,
cool, that person's not coming back to the gym now. And then you're going to say, judge them for being overweight. And it's like, yeah, because you made them feel like shit. Of course they didn't want to come back. Like,
And that's kind of where I was going with some of this is like, man, so with we have a really diverse community at the barbell club. I have members that this is the first gym they've ever been a member of, members that have been out of it for years trying to get back, meatheads like me that have been doing it for a long time. We've got a really wide range, which is cool, and it's building an awesome community. But the most important thing to me is that everyone feels comfortable there, because I want them to be there, and I want them to feel comfortable being vulnerable. Everyone looks at vulnerability as a negative attribute, and it is not. And so ultimately it's the positivity of like encouraging other people and doing all that. You know who Joey Swole is? Yeah. He's great, man. His gym positivity thing is awesome. And he's been on this mission like the last year of like calling people out for when they for when, people are like making fun of other people. And so that's kind of where I wanted to circle with. So that's when I was talking about, gym pet peeves, because we all have gym pet peeves, right? Every single one of us, whether we're the one that owns the gym, whether we're the trainer, whether we're just the patron and the person that trains at that gym, we all have them. But the thing that we all have in common, we're there to better ourselves through strength training.
Yeah.
And I just, it's my hope and my goal at the Barbell Club that it's a place that people feel safe, and that we can avoid a lot of those things. But I think there's also some of the pet peeves come from just those of us who've been doing it a long time. We know that there's a certain etiquette. Yeah. And again, people don't know what they don't know.
Exactly.
I've even actually kicked around the idea of like doing some videos of like, hey, like here's some gym etiquette that like is common knowledge, or at least I think it's common knowledge. Yeah. But maybe it's not, and just getting people thinking about some of that kind of stuff.
And that's the thing. It's like, so hogging machines, stuff like that. Some people just don't realize that.
They just don't know.
You don't know. Mm-hmm. Some people definitely do know, and then you're like, okay, then it's not as excusable. No, that's actually been the thing. So I train mostly like small group women's classes, and we train in like a little like training room in the gym.
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the biggest reasons why that does well is it puts people in a bubble to where it's blocked off. It makes them feel more secure, and like you don't feel like, oh, is someone watching me while I screw up how to put this bar on, or just something like that. It's like just making people feel safe initially. Yeah. And then eventually it's like you're gonna understand how to do all this stuff. You'll be able to set your own rack and all that stuff. But to be able to do it in a pressure-free environment, I think is huge.
I think that does help people, and I think that's also the benefit of being with a trainer, right?
Yeah.
Because then you've got that guidance, and and I have the luxury of all of my members that I've signed up every single one of them, right? And so. And every single one of them, like, hey, if you have questions, you have concerns, like, I need to know about them. I want to know, and I want to help you. I want you to be successful. And, it reminds me, you were talking about, the people are looking at me and things like that. I had a client one time that had a severe, like, phobia, like, of the gym. And really significant self-image issues and things like that. But she knew that she needed, for her health and just well-being, she needed to get into some fitness. And, I mean, we're talking, like, the first like 5 sessions, like, I mean, she was crying every time because of like the stress of it. And we were in there, and it was, I don't know, maybe our 3rd or 4th session, and she was getting emotional because she felt like everyone was looking at her because she's overweight and all these things, and the intrusive thoughts that your brain gives you. And I will just say her name was Susie. I'll say, Susie, do you know why you feel like everyone's looking at you? She's like, why? I go, because they are. And she's like, right? Like, she's like horrified. And I'm like, and here's why. I go, what time do I train you? She goes, 3:00. And I go, right, 3:00 on Mondays. 3:00 on Mondays is also these people's gym time. So they see the same faces day in and day out. Yep. I go, how many times have you trained with me? She goes, this is the 3rd. I go, right. You're a new face. I go, when you're in your normal setting, like at work, and someone walked in that you didn't know, would you look and observe?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I guess I would. I was like, that's all that is.
Yeah.
I go, your brain is giving you these intrusive thoughts that often, right, we create problems that don't exist. Yep. And I go, now, are there some people out in this world that would look at you for the reasons that you think they are? Sure. But that's like 1 in 10,000.
And you can't live your life based on that.
And so, talking through that, she still had, we still had an uphill climb, but we were able to get through it a little bit and getting her focused on like, what are the real reasons you're here? And the other thing I told her, I go, Susie, and if they are looking at like, you're trained with me, like they can fuck off.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you think they're going to say anything? Like, come on. Yeah. I'm like, no way. I'm like, Susie, you're safe here with me. I will choke slam some people if I need to. I go, but you can trust me that the reasons aren't what your brain's giving you.
Well, to me, that's just as huge as like, obviously, like, if someone has a weight loss goal, we want them to hit that weight loss goal. But to me, it's even cooler is when you see someone who's now just actually comfortable coming to the gym. Or like, so being a male, I guess there's certain things we don't always realize as far as like milestones. Like for a lot of females, like the first time they wear a sleeveless shirt, like, and it's like, I never even thought of that. And like one of my girls, she was like in tears the first time she was like that excited about this. And it's like, that's huge, man. Or like, I had a girl that I was training this summer, and like a pretty fit looking individual before us. She bought her first ever pair of shorts. She'd never worn shorts. This is like a 35-year-old lady who doesn't wear shorts. And it's like, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, man. People start coming out of their bubble, right? If like strength training, we talked a lot about the body and all of that, but what it does for the mind, what it does for confidence, what it does for
just feeling
all
capable.
These things. It's huge, man. And I think it's undervalued. It's the most underused antidepressant on planet Earth.
Totally.
It's got to be there, man. It's the truth. We got to get more people strength training. Yeah. So I guess one of the last things is, what do you feel like separates you from other trainers, man?
I would just say obsession.
I like that.
I don't know if you've ever, my wife and I kind of get into the whole Enneagram thing where it's like, different personality types. Again, I thought it was kind of like the like horoscope type thing, but it's weird when you read it. It does kind of make sense.
Sure.
So I'm like an Enneagram 5, and so like I just never feel informed enough. So I like every day I feel like I have to try and learn at least something to just get a little bit better every single day.
Sure.
So I guess in general I just try to outwork everybody.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I'll ever feel content in my knowledge. Like I just feel like there's always something more you can learn.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And so and then that takes me to my next question, that kind of, what separates you, and just a little bit more about you. What does your training look like? Like what are your goals, and what is your weekly training?
Yeah, so mine, I've just been working around some just random injury stuff, but again, I still like to bench, still like to deadlift, still like a lot of body weight stuff. So I have now, like, we have a garage gym at our house. Well, technically it's a spare bedroom gym, and like 2 weeks it'll become a garage gym, but because when you're at a gym 8-10 hours a day, sometimes kind of nice to just get away and like actually just do my own thing, not have to worry about being bothered by members and stuff. So I'd say I do probably 90% of my workouts at home. Sometimes I'll come in on a Sunday and just close up the vault and just go work in that room. But I don't know, at a certain point, I'm more of an introvert, so I like just doing my own private workout and just getting it in.
Cool. Awesome. Do you feel that your training goals or your physique ever hamstring you on working with certain clients?
Yeah, to agree. And that's where I try and think of this. Sometimes the injury thing can be a blessing, because there's definitely stuff where, like, I tore my labrum, and then like 3 months later I ended up getting a client who also had a torn labrum. So it's like, sometimes you realize like, oh, like I can actually identify with what you're going through, and here's what helped me. And obviously, like, what I did with her wasn't exactly what helped me. Like, we had to deviate on some stuff, but it's like, at least it gives you a baseline of like, this is probably where we can start from. So again, sometimes it's just, I think I can't think the doctor's name, but he calls like the curse of knowledge or whatever, where you're like, it sucked to go through this, but now it lets me help this person and make their journey a little bit faster.
Absolutely. Yeah. Using that experience. I think too, again, for people that like maybe thinking about getting with a trainer or working with a trainer, for me, I fought it to where, well, I don't want to look like you, right? Because that's my only gig apparently, right? Because of the way I look. And I think rightly so. And then, maybe some would be like, well, I want to get huge. And well, Ryan's not huge. So again, like, obviously because of what my goals are, that doesn't get immediately, projected on my clients. So I just think recognizing that, and fill them out. I always tell people, I'm like, because I've had clients that I've worked with forever that have like moved or things like that. And they're like, do you know anyone in this area? And I'm like, I don't. I go, but interview them. Yeah. It's a job interview.
Exactly.
get to know them a little bit.
You don't have to just take the first person you see.
You don't. And I go and do one session.
Yeah.
And if it's a fit, awesome. And if it's not, next.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think getting to know the person and trust that, hey, their fitness goals aren't necessarily going to be projected on you.
Exactly. So, like, we've all seen like the powerlifter who only, and again, like, I have a lot of ladies who do powerlifting. It doesn't mean that I want every single person to be a powerlifter. Like, like we could also still squat, bench, deadlift and have it being totally unrelated. But also, it's like, if bench isn't right for you, it's like, and your goal's not to powerlift, like, there's 12 billion pressing exercises we can do. It's like, just because I like an exercise doesn't mean I'm going to give it to you. No, I'm not going to give you burpees because I really don't like burpees. But in general, it's like, we're going to, I think that's an underrated thing with the trainer too, is like finding out what your clients like. Because if they really hate, say hammer curls, they're probably not going to push very hard on hammer curls. So it's like, okay, can we find a different variation to train the same pattern that they actually like? Because I feel like they're going to push a lot harder when they enjoy the exercise.
For sure.
Like, I tell every one of my clients, like, I don't care if you hate an exercise. Let me know immediately, and I will sub it out. Everything is replaceable.
Do you ever reintroduce it to navigate why they hate it?
Sometimes we do. Yeah. Or it's like, if there's a very specific reason we have to do it, it's like, well, sorry, we're going to do this. But in general, it's like, there's 100 ways to squat. There's 100 ways to row and whatever. Absolutely. It's like, if you hate it, just, be nice about it, but complain. And we can sub it out. Yeah. Try not to do it every session, but
absolutely.
And honestly, I feel like every trainer should be like that. Like, you should feel comfortable telling your trainer, like, hey, I'm not comfortable doing this, or I don't like doing this.
Absolutely.
Or just, if it hurts, tell them.
You have to be open with them.
Yeah.
You have to be open with them. Yep. Because that's only going to help them add more specificity and help them guide you to ultimately what your goals are.
Like those first couple months are kind of a trial run. It's like
for sure, because you're
figuring each other out. And
you're getting to work best. For me, I'm getting to know how they move, and it's inevitable that something shows up later that they didn't put on their medical questionnaire.
Exactly. You broke your neck 6 years ago, and you didn't think to tell me. Like this is probably relevant.
I had one that didn't bother to tell me he was epileptic, and
kind of want to know that.
That's a story I'll tell you sometime. So. Well, cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you coming on here to the PR podcast.
Thank you.
Spending some time hashing over, talking about strength training and kind of all things fitness. Yeah. Hopefully, you guys all got something from this and something that you can take and put forward into your training, into your life, and maybe or into someone's life that you know. So, subscribe, like, share, all that. And most importantly, live the one more rep philosophy, build the life you want. Build the better you.